Do you have everything ready, honey? Yes, Mum. Did you bring warm clothes, books, your laptop? Yes, Mum. I checked everything twice. I'm pretty sure I don't forget anything. There's always something missed when you move, Sam. Samuel was ready to leave. He was a bit stressed the last couple of days preparing everything. He was going to start his year as a fresher at university, and he was moving to the city, some 3 hours from his town and his parents. He was overexcited thinking of the experiences he was going to have over the next few years. He was going to leave his parents and settle in a shared flat with a third-year student. He checked hundreds of adverts and talked to the tenants. Thomas, the one with whom he was gonna live for the next course, seemed a nice guy, and the room, services and location, near the university, looked pretty good, as well as the prize. His mom called Dad and they brought him to the train station where the traditional scene was seen by anyone around: goodbye kisses, a tear or two from his mom, some advice from his dad like you'll become a man now, take responsibility for your acts. Some final hugs, and he came into the train with his luggage, a big suitcase and his backpack where he put his laptop and some books. A final goodbye hand from the window, and the train started its path to the city and to a different life for Samuel. After some minutes, the tiredness took over the excitement and he fell asleep. He arrived in the city and headed to his new house. That was a building near the university and mainly occupied by students. He could see a lot of youngsters around the streets and some pubs, laundries, or takeaways. He rang the bell and Thomas opened the door. He was a couple of years older than him and a couple of inches taller as well. Samuel met him on a video call when they were arranging for the housing, but that was the first time they met personally. Sam? Nice to meet you. How was the trip? Please, come in. Thanks, this is your room. Feel yourself and home and come to the living room when you put everything in your place. It's Freshers Week and there's some events and parties around. I can show you later. First time in the city? Yes, it's my first time, a part of the day we came to visit the uni. And also my first time living away from my parents. I'm sure you'll enjoy your stay. Thomas was a nice guy and Samuel soon felt comfortable at his new place. They kept their first week exploring what university life was offering. Samuel learned about different societies and their activities. He joined some of them. He got really interested in theater society, as he always loved to play theater in school. When learned that, Thomas told him about a job Samuel could be interested in. He was occasionally doing animation activities for children. He registered with a company last year, and from time to time they called him to go to some child's birthday party and amuse little boys and girls. Sometimes, he just had to organize games for them, sometimes it was more elaborate and he had to dress like a superhero or some famous character from a movie so that Spider-Man or Batman would be present on the boy's birthday and amaze his guests. It wasn't really hard work to do, although sometimes the little brats could be tiring. He quite liked it. It was mainly on the weekends, so it didn't really interfere with his studies and he was well paid. And he could always refuse a call if he was busy or had exams the next day. Samuel got interested in the job and decided to go with Thomas next time he was called and asked the company if he could join. After the Freshers' Week, the courses started and Samuel got into the study mood. He had quite a lot of work immediately. He had to read books, write essays, do some research. He met their university mates and soon got involved with them in work and leisure, having some drinks after classes and going out on Saturdays evenings. Amongst his mates, Paul and Ann soon became his best friends at class, and the three of them joined for group works and social activities. Around 1 month after the course started, Thomas reminded Samuel about the job he was doing. He was called for work and asked if he could bring someone else with him. It was going to be a birthday party on a Saturday midday and a pair of youngsters were demanded to entertain a dozen children. They should go to someone's house and do some activities and games for about 3 hours. Thomas convinced Samuel that it could be a good opportunity to try and see if he liked the job, so they went together to the company's office. The company specialized in shows and events, and children's parties were just a small part of their activities. When they arrived there, Thomas introduced Samuel to the guy who was at the office and organized these parties. He was called Matt and was a guy near his 40s and very athletic. "So Sam, you want to join our team? Do you have experience in events?" "Not really," answered Samuel. "I just came here 1 month ago. I'm in my first year of university. Thomas told me about this, and I think I'd like to have a part-time job which provides me some income but still have most of my time for my studies. I have some experience in theater at school, but nothing else." "Theater? That's fine. Most of the time you'll have to play a character. That's fine for me, and I like children. I was volunteering at a summer camp the last 2 summers." "Oh, that's brilliant. I think you'll enjoy this. And you can go with Thomas the first times while you get more confident." So, Samuel went with Thomas to his first duty as child entertainer. They didn't have to bring any special outfit for this time, just athletic clothes and a t-shirt of the company, not like the superhero's costume Thomas told he had to wear sometimes. They had to spend a couple of hours with 8 children, playing some sports activities and games. Samuel got soon into the mood and really enjoyed the session. The 2 hours quickly went by and they came back to the office to give the t-shirts back and get their earnings. Matt looked worried. "So, how was your first day, Sam?" "It was great, I really enjoyed it. I think I'd like to repeat it whenever you need it." "Glad to hear that. Well, I'm really needing someone for this afternoon, but I'm afraid you can't help." "What's up this afternoon, Matt?" asked Thomas. "They just called us for a big birthday party for someone's daughter. There will be around 20 children and they want a couple of animators for 3 hours. And they're willing to pay good money for that." "That's great," said Thomas happily. "We could go there." "Sam, are you free this afternoon?" "Yes," answered Samuel, "I don't have anything to do today." "I'm afraid you aren't what they're looking for, Thomas. The mom said her daughter loves princesses and she would be very excited to have a princess at her birthday's party. One of you could go as her escort, but I'd really need a girl to go with you, before I can confirm the deal. Do you know any of your girlfriends who could come with you?" Not really," Matt said Thomas. "It's too soon. Let me think about it." Thomas got his phone and called a couple of girls she knew, but they weren't eager to come as they didn't feel like dressing up and entertaining a bunch of children. Samuel thought about her mate and called her to explain about the job, but she was busy with family business. Samuel made a silent no movement with his head in front of the disappointed faces of Thomas and Matt. After that, there was a moment of silence, broken for Matt. "Maybe I should call and say we can't cover the party today." "Wait," said Thomas. "I can't believe we can't find someone who wants to get some money for 3 hours." Thomas looked at both sides and then said, "What if Sam could play the princess?" Samuel looked at his flatmate with an unbelievable look. Did he just propose him to play the princess? "I don't think that's possible," said Matt with a smile on his face. "We need a true girl to act as a credible princess in front of 20 children. It's not like a drag show or something. But Sam has a slim body and cute face, he really could pass as a girl with a proper outfit." Samuel couldn't avoid reddening his face. He didn't open his mouth while listening to the dialogue between Matt and Thomas. Maybe you're right, but still Sam isn't a girl. He could dress and put on makeup, but still he wouldn't look like a real girl, his voice, his mannerisms, all other things would show up that he's not a girl. But do you have any other option? Said Thomas with a loud voice. Maybe we could just try and see. Sam, would you like to be the princess this afternoon at the party? There's good money on it. At that moment, Samuel was still in shock, trying to cope with what his flatmate just proposed. But he couldn't be silent now. Matt and Thomas were looking at him with what he thought were inquisitive looks. Samuel enjoyed the job, but having to pass for a girl wasn't something he could expect in the morning. He remembered when he was 12 and his mom dressed him up as a girl for a costume party at school. She found an old 70s style dress from when she was a teenager. She dressed and made him up, added a wig, breast pad, some jewelry and a purse. When she was done, Samuel looked at the mirror and had an awkward feeling. He obviously could recognize himself in the mirror, but something was different and it wasn't just the outfit. He could feel like he was a different person. His mom enjoyed the result and said things like he made a beautiful girl or that she'd love to have a daughter for a day. At the party, Samuel felt at ease. Many girls came to chat with him, saying how good he looked or that dress or makeup suited him and he could pass for a girl. He wasn't used to being the center of their attention. But he also remembered when some boys approached to make fun of him and how that made him feel inferior. Now, he had to answer Thomas's proposition, and that meant dressing up again as a girl, although this time it wouldn't be just a dress and a wig. He would really have to make an effort not to be seen as a boy in a dress. He feared that. But on the other hand, he loved the job. And he was thankful to Matt and, especially, Thomas for the chance he gave to him. Samuel kept looking alternatively at both of them and, finally, he said with trembling voice, "I'm not sure if I can fool someone and make them think I'm a real girl. But if you both think so, I might give it a try." "Excellent!" shouted Thomas. Said Matt, still doubtful. "You said you used to play theater at school. Did you ever play a female role, Sam?" "Not really, although once my mom dressed me up as a girl for a school costume party." Matt was still thinking about the possibilities and attentively looking at Samuel. "I'll tell you what. I'll call my colleague, let her know the idea and see what she thinks. She's the one that can do magic anyway." Matt took his telephone and talked. "Hi Rebecca, it's Matt. Remember about the princess party? We might have a princess, only that she isn't a girl. We think we could work it out, but you probably should meet our potential princess and see if you find it possible or not, before we confirm the job." Matt was listening on the telephone and nodding with his head. Aha. Okay. "We'll be there in 15 minutes, said Matt, closing the call. "Sam, Rebecca wants to see you. We'll go to her place so that she can check you before we confirm the duty, all right?" "Great!" shouted Thomas. Samuel nodded his head in silence. He didn't want to deceive them, but felt like he was entering a dark tunnel and he couldn't see the exit. 10 minutes later he was with Thomas in Matt's car heading to Rebecca's. They arrived soon and were welcomed by a beautiful 40-something lovely woman that saluted Matt and Thomas with a big smile and hues. "So, this is our princess-to-be?" said Rebecca, giving her hand to a shy Samuel that felt like he was being examined in a laboratory. You really have a pretty face. I think we can do something. Matt, we'll go to the studio to work. You and Thomas can take a drink and sit. We won't take long. Sam, would you please come with me?" asked the lady rhetorically while taking his hand and bringing him to another room. Samuel felt at ease at her touching. Even if he was a bit nervous, Rebecca looked so sweet and lovely. She had a permanent smile on her face. "So, have you ever done anything like that before?" "I dressed once as a girl for a costume party," answered Samuel. Well, this isn't gonna be the same, you know. We have to make them think you're a real girl. Look, this is my studio. I work as a hairdresser and beauty assistant, and I'm also Thomas's partner in events production. Let me tell you what we're gonna do. I'm gonna make you up. You have nice features for a boy, you aren't so tall or muscular, so with some makeup and maybe a wig I really think you could pass for a girl. This is my part. Then, your part will be showing yourself like a girl. More than that, as a princess you should be very feminine, flamboyant and delicate and let everyone think you are. We're gonna give it a try. I'll make your face look like a girl's face and then we'll see how it looks and how you feel to do your part. If you feel weird or insecure at any time, we'll stop the plan and cancel the event. If we all think this might work, I'll work on the rest of your body and send Matt and Thomas to get the costumes and confirm the party. Is that all right, honey? Samuel nodded with his head, not knowing exactly how he could make himself look feminine, flamboyant and delicate. But once on the way, he couldn't say no now. So, he sat in a seat in front of a mirror when Rebecca told him to do it and wait for her to carry out her process. She first combed his hair behind and applied some cream to his face. After a few minutes she washed his face and it became so soft, no sign of any hair on it. She then applied some powder and brushed his face all over while she was explaining him what she was doing. I'm putting you a base so that your face looks flawless. I'm doing your eyes now, putting some color in your eyelids. I'm doing your mascara now, so your eyelashes will look longer and sharper like a girl's. Samuel was looking in the mirror how Rebecca was working his face and how it was slowly changing. I'll give some color to your cheeks. I'm gonna make your lips now. At the end, Rebecca said, I think we can let the guys have a look at you. Samuel looked again to the mirror and there was no doubt that it was him looking at himself, but his face was totally transformed. He looked so much like a girl on a Saturday evening before dressing up for the party. He was shocked at how much similar to a girl he could become with the help of some makeup. Rebecca put her hands in his hair and ruffled it in a casual style. She took again his hand and brought him to the hall, where Thomas and Matt were waiting. Guys, what do you think of our princess? Samuel could only stare at their smiles. That's great! I know you could do it. You make a very pretty girl, Sam, said Thomas. Good job, Rebecca, added Matt. How do you feel, Sam? Do you think you can make it? With a proper dress and Beck's help, I'm sure you could look like a real girl without anyone to notice. Yes, he looks lovely, shouted a very enthusiastic Thomas. What do you think, Sam? Asked Rebecca. Want to complete the deal? If we arrived here, I guess I could do it, answered shyly Samuel. Do you think it'll be too hard to play the part of the princess? Not harder than any other girl, at least. Okay, said Matt. I'll confirm the party. They will be very happy. Me and Thomas will go for the costumes. You girls will stay here and complete the transformation, as well as practicing the princess part. When listened, you girls, Rebecca looked at Samuel with a big and sweet smile and took his hand again. You guys, be sure to get a very pretty princess dress. We have all the compliments we need here. Give us a couple of hours to prepare. Come on, girl, let's continue our work, said Rebecca with an almost laughing face. And going behind Rebecca's hand again to the studio, Samuel felt weirder to be called a girl. He could say Rebecca was enjoying her work. He thought it must be kind of a challenge for her to transform a boy like him into a princess and let anyone think he was a real girl. He could feel a chill in his breast, knowing that the whole thing was getting real. We need a lot to do. First, we'll need you to fully shave your body. My body? Of course, no princess has hair in her legs or beard. I understood you put something to take my beard out, but Samuel couldn't finish the sentence, scared by Rebecca's big laugh. Beard? Samuel looked surprised. Sorry, hon, didn't want to make fun of you. I just found it amusing you talking about your beard. Anyway, we had to take care of the small hair on your face, as well as in your legs. We'll find some tights that go with your dress, but still we don't want a hairy princess. So, let me tell you how to do it. It's just the same thing we did on your face. Just go to the bathroom, put this cream on your legs or other parts where a princess shouldn't show hair, and then take a hot shower. Remember not to wet your head so you can keep your makeup. Here you have a towel. Let me know when you're finished, while I look for other things we'll need. Is that fine, sweetie? Samuel nodded again, took the towel and closed himself in the bathroom. He took his clothes off. He then went inside the shower, applied the cream on his legs and armpits. Truly, he didn't have too much hair to hide. After that, he took a shower and could see his hair going down the drain. After the shower, he took the towel and dried himself. He could now really notice the effects of the depilatory cream. Not that he had a lot of hair, but he felt his legs were very smooth, as never before, and his hand could slide down his legs when he touched them. He put the towel around his waist and left the bathroom. Ah, you're ready. Good, I was looking for something for you to wear, let's see if it suits you. Come with me. Samuel followed Rebecca to a room on the upper floor where he saw some pieces of clothing lying in the bed. Amongst them, there was a beautiful set of underwear. It was a beige semi-transparent bustier bra with a pattern of flowers embroidered at the front and its matching panty. It wasn't the first bra Samuel ever saw. He was used to seeing his mom's underwear and sometimes even saw her in a bra. He also sometimes had a glimpse at the straps of the girls in high school. But they were usually plain bras, maybe with some lace details. He also saw some lingerie adverts as they were usually topic of comments amongst horny teenagers. They looked sexy and were shown by beautiful models. But he never saw anything like that before. It looked so dainty, but the only adjective that was in Samuel's mind was beautiful. And thinking that this delicate item was prepared for him to wear made him shiver. I got this as a present from a customer who works in fashion. It's so lovely, isn't it? Said Rebecca looking at it. It's not my cup size, but I think it can suit you. Besides, it'll be much better for you to wear a bustier, as we'll have to figure out how to make your boobs. I think a bustier will keep them more fixed and safer to your body. Let me help you. With that, Rebecca got the bustier, made Samuel to turn and delicately put the bra around his arms. She then, very softly, closed the hooks in Samuel's back. I'm gonna put you the tightest hook, I think it's gonna be better for you. We can loosen it up a bit if it's too tight and uncomfortable. After a few seconds, Samuel could feel a good pressure in his chest. Rebecca was still arranging the straps and unwrinkling the bustier, adjusting it to Samuel's skin as if it was his own skin. Then, Rebecca turned Samuel again to place him head to her. She grabbed something and put it inside the cups. This is some padding. It's normally used for push-up bras or girls who want to show a size bigger or two. But I think it'll be okay for you. You're supposed to be a teenager, don't need to have big boobs, said Rebecca, always with a smile on her face. Samuel felt a slight bigger pressure and saw how his chest got a different shape. Now I'll be out for a minute and let you put the panties on. Samuel again felt a hot rush in his whole body, but especially his face. Did she just ask him to put on the panties? Do you think it's necessary? I mean, I understand the bra, but the panties. A girl always has to wear matching underwear, replied Rebecca with a laugh. Honey, that would be better for you. The panties will help to keep your willy in place, you know what I mean? she said with a wink. And they also help you to feel more in character, I guess. And sure, they'll get a princess dress with wide skirts, but try to hide your willy between your legs so that it's never noticed. We don't want them to see a bulge where it shouldn't be, do we? Let me know when you're finished and I'll help you with the tights. With that, Rebecca left Samuel alone with the bustier in his chest and the towel in his waist. He looked at the panties. They looked so dainty. He touched the panties and they felt so soft in his fingers. He removed the towel and proceeded to put the panties on. He pulled them up and it was like nothing his legs had been in contact with before. He then tried to put his penis between his legs, as Rebecca told him, and adjusted the thin strips to his hips. If he felt pressure in his chest when Rebecca put the bra on him, he forgot, as the pressure in his groin was much harder, especially in his testicles. He thought that was the most uncomfortable situation. He wasn't sure if he could cope with that for a long time. He was taken back from his thoughts by Rebecca's voice. "Are you finished, princess?" Samuel thought Rebecca was a really nice woman, always with a smile on her face and really helping with all the fuss. But sometimes, he felt like she was too happy, or even that she was teasing him for all the princess and girly stuff, and that made him feel kind of uncomfortable. Yes, I'm done. Let me see. Wonderful. It really suits you. I have the tights for you. And then, Rebecca showed him a pair of white semi-transparent tights. She showed Samuel how to put them on. You have to roll a leg, put it on up the knee, then the other leg, like that, and now you can put it all up to your waist. Be careful not to stretch too much. Then, adjust from your feet up so that they fit your legs perfectly. Samuel felt the touch of the tights in his legs. That feeling was very special. He could notice his hands sliding on her legs while he was adjusting the tights. He felt his legs compressed, but in such a lovely way as he couldn't imagine before. He adjusted the waist of the tights over the panties, just up his belly button. That's fine, hun. Your legs look great. Now put this robe on you, we'll finish your makeup. Samuel put the robe on. His senses were making notice of the changes on his look as a kind of alarms, like if he wasn't aware of that. The sight, of course, seeing himself in a flowery robe with mounds in his chest, the touch on his chest, his groin and his legs, and the hearing every time he moved and could hear the rubbing of his legs on tights with the robe. He sat on a chair in the same room and Rebecca worked on his makeup again. Before, it was just a subtle touch to see if you could look like a girl. Now, we have to add some more, so that you really look like a princess. She proceeded to apply more makeup, put eyelashes on him and paint his nails with some gloss. After 20 minutes, Rebecca said that she was done, when the bell rang. It was Matt and Thomas that came back with the costumes. Oh, perfect timing. Wait here, I'm gonna get the costume. Rebecca came back quickly with a big transparent bag with some pink outfit on it. She took the dress from the bag and Samuel could see a wonderful full princess dress. He was overwhelmed by the thought of having to wear such a beautiful item. I'll help you with that. Take the robe off. Samuel took off the robe and saw himself again in the mirror with feminine undies. Rebecca held the dress and pointed Samuel to put his legs into the skirt. After he did that, Rebecca guided his hands through the sleeves, adjusted the dress to his shoulders and then buttoned up his back. Samuel felt weirder every minute he was transforming into a princess. The bodice of the dress felt so tight to his body, but the skirts were wide enough. He looked again in the mirror. He could now see the figure of a young lady. He noticed the weight of the dress with every step. He felt really queer. Ah, this dress is superb. You look amazing, said Rebecca. You only need the wig and the crown to complete your look. Oh, and there is a necklace too. Let me help you. Thomas is dressing downstairs. Rebecca, as she did all afternoon, put effort into completing a brilliant transformation. Samuel couldn't believe the result. When he assumed before he had to dress up as a princess, he couldn't imagine he could look like a real beautiful girl in a princess dress. But now he was watching her arranging a blonde wig into his head and putting a crown on top of it. He was absorbed looking at the mirror while Rebecca was working on his appearance. If he'd seen a picture of himself dressed like that in the morning, he would surely feel a desire to know this lovely girl. And now, he was that girl. He remembered when his mom dressed him up as a girl when he was 12. But, as Rebecca said, this was a totally different experience. He couldn't believe how beautiful and feminine he was looking. He thought that even his mom couldn't recognize him if she saw him now. "We're ready down here." Samuel heard Matt's voice from downstairs. "What about you, girls?" "Just 1 minute," answered Rebecca. She combed the hair of the wig to his back, leaving some of it in the front, adjusted the necklace and the crown, and took a pair of white shoes from the cupboard. "I think they can fit you. They might be tight, but they're soft and they probably give themselves a little bit. It's fine for today at least. We'll have to get a pair of your size if you need to play the princess again. Anyway, they won't show under your long skirt." Samuel had a shiver hearing that he might have to be a princess another time. He tried not to think about it, put on the shoes with some help from Rebecca, and stood again. "Lovely. It's time now for the guys to see you," said Rebecca. "Guys, we're coming down." Thomas and Matt were waiting in the hall. Thomas already had his prince costume on him, which didn't require so much time and effort to put on. Rebecca went down to announce the appearance of the princess. She told Samuel how he had to move to descend the spiral stairs in a gracious and feminine way. She advised him to lift the skirt with one hand to avoid stepping on it. Thomas and Matt heard the sound of the shoes on the metallic steps. They saw a big pink skirt moving in the whole width of the stair. Samuel was taking small steps trying to get used to the long skirts. He was going down slowly, with one hand holding his skirt as he was told and the other in the railing, not very sure of his moves, as he couldn't see the steps behind his skirt. He tried to move in a delicate way, not really sure how it was to have gracious and feminine gestures. He finally arrived at the last steps and could see them. Thomas and Matt were open-mouthed, while Rebecca showed her biggest smile, being proud of her work. Samuel was really nervous. He had a genuine innocent look on his face. He stopped at the last step and looked afraid at Thomas and Matt. They were looking at him. Thomas had the prince costume on him. He wore tight trousers, big boots, something like a jacket, and a cape. He didn't have any crown or something on it. And he hadn't any makeup or wig on him. He looked more like a page boy than a prince, but the truth was that both costumes looked quite good and elaborate, not like the typical cheap fancy dress you get in a costume shop for Halloween. They were staring at Samuel with big eyes. After some seconds of silence that seemed like minutes, Samuel had the courage to open his mouth. "So, do you think I can make it?" "Absolutely," said Matt. "You look gorgeous. Rebecca, you did a really great job." "Thanks, Matt," said Rebecca. "It's just that the mold was really good." Thomas was always the most enthusiastic about the idea of Samuel playing the princess. He loved the job and probably needed the money more than anyone else. He was eager about trying the whole thing and kept cheerful and lively all the time. But now, he looked a bit serious and absorbed. Samuel moved his face towards him, like looking for approval. "You look amazing," finally said Thomas. But something was different about his mood. Samuel could notice that, but couldn't guess the reason. Maybe it was him who was finally gonna feel embarrassed to go to work with a transvestite princess? It was Samuel who had to put on a dress and wig and made all the effort to look like a girly princess. In the end, playing the prince or the sporting monitor didn't make much difference, just a different outfit, that was all. He didn't have to move or talk differently to pretend he was from other gender. Maybe was he afraid that someone could find out that the princess was really a boy? "Well, are you ready, then?" asked Matt. "We should be going in 20 minutes or so." "Let me practice a little bit with Sam," Matt said Rebecca. "He's been in transformation mode all this time, but he needs to be in character. He has to practice his walk and mannerisms a little bit. And also Thomas. Look, both of you, I know this may sound weird, you have to entertain a bunch of kids for 3 hours, like you already did, but you need to play your role too. You're supposed to be a charming prince and his lovely princess. Sam, you need to feel like a princess and look very feminine, that also implies playing the girlfriend. Thomas, you need to think of Sam like your girlfriend." Rebecca, as usual, was smiling while seeing both teenagers staring at her with big eyes. "Of course, you don't need to kiss or something," continued Rebecca with a laugh, "but offer your arm, hold hands while arriving, you know, that kind of things. Girls will probably want to play with Sam and boys will approach Thomas, but you have to play the couple when you're together." Thomas looked at Samuel and offered his arm. Samuel looked embarrassed but took his arm. Both youngsters looked at each other for a second and then fell into laughter. "That's a good start," said Rebecca with her perennial smile. "Sam, you should walk a little bit, to get used to move with your dress, to sit and everything." Samuel started to walk through the corridor, always holding the side of his long skirt. At Rebecca's guide, he practiced sitting and getting up, always trying to put his skirt well before. She had him moving and practicing for a while, until Matt announced it was time to leave. "I'm gonna bring you two to the house and Rebecca will come 3 hours later to take you back here, so you can change again and go home." "Matt, could I also come to the house?" asked Rebecca. "I'd love to see the couple arriving at the party." "Sure, but we have to leave in 2 minutes." 1 minute later, they were going out to get into Matt's car. After crossing the door and feeling the fresh air on his face, Samuel felt insecure. There were a couple of neighbors passing by that had a look at the strange couple getting into the car, but were probably surprised by the clothes, not having a clue that it was a boy in the princess costume. Thomas opened the back door and let Samuel get into the car. He had some difficulties putting the skirt inside the car while sitting. Thomas helped him, picking up the rest of the skirt and giving it to Samuel, who folded her on his lap. Rebecca loved the scene. "You're a gentleman, Thomas. Why don't you guys go in front? We girls will sit behind." Samuel was really getting used to being called a girl. Inside the car, Rebecca helped him with the skirt and kept touching his wig, checking his makeup and getting sure everything was perfect. Rebecca called the house to announce the prince and the princess were about to arrive soon. She told Thomas and Samuel that they would get out of the car 50 yards before the house to cross a small park so that the kids could see them arriving from the house. When the car stopped, Rebecca went out and helped Samuel to do the same. She checked again everything, adjusted the wig, the crown and the dress and gave her last advices. "Remember to always feel pretty and feminine. It should be easier to feel that than just pretending you are. Thomas, take good care of her and make her feel like a princess." With that, Rebecca hugged Samuel and gave him a couple of girly kisses, just moving her face around his cheeks without really touching them. "Samuel, take Thomas's arm and you both can walk to that house, number 50. I'll call the hosts to tell the kids to be out in 2 minutes so that they can see you arriving. I'll come later to pick you up back home. Good luck to both of you. Have a great time." Thomas offered his arm to Samuel, he took it and they started to walk to the house. "Sam, hold your skirt," shouted Rebecca. Don't let it get dirty before you start the party. And smile. Samuel felt embarrassed again, not really knowing if for Rebecca shouting about his skirt in front of other people who were at the park at that time and who couldn't avoid looking at the fancy couple, or for forgetting to lift his skirt as he was trained during the previous hours. He tried to concentrate and put him again in the character. He held his skirt with his left hand, forced a smile, and went on walking to the house. Rebecca had again a big but now silent smile on her face and thought, good girl. Samuel kept trying to look his part but was getting really nervous. Thomas noticed it as Samuel's hand was shaking on his own arm. Don't worry, Sam, don't be nervous, just enjoy. You look so beautiful and nobody will guess. Are you sure? I'm so sure that I wouldn't recognize you if I didn't know. Seriously? As serious as I'd ask a girl like you out. Samuel couldn't help but let out a nervous laugh. Thomas saw that his partner had to relieve some tension and forget his nerves, so he continued joking as they both were crossing the park. Actually, I'm feeling like I'm having a date with a gorgeous chick. Oh, are you? Yes, I have a beauty in my arm, don't I? But don't feel like having a date, it's just for a job. Oh, please, don't spoil the illusion. This time, Samuel gave a hearty laugh. Thomas did a good job in relieving Samuel's nervousness. They kept crossing the park, both showing a sincere smile, much more appropriate for the children's party they were about to have. At the end of the park, they saw some curious children's faces looking at them from the entrance of number 50. Thomas kept joking around and made Samuel totally at ease. We arrived, milady. You better start showing your charms to our hosts. Samuel saw some little girls giggling and pointing at them. That, as well as Thomas's words, made him feel better than he thought. He put on character again and remembered Rebecca's words, feel always pretty and feminine, it should be easier to feel that than just pretending you are. He tried to really feel like a princess and not let anyone think he wasn't. With this thought, Samuel, who was still holding his skirt, started to play with it in a very feminine mode just before being welcomed by the lady of the house, Mrs. Lynn, and about 12 little boys and girls, a few of them also dressed as princesses. When arriving at the door, Thomas asked the host, a very elegant woman who wore a sleeveless pink blouse and long black skirt, Mrs. Lynn? Yes. Welcome, Prince and Princess, please come in. We're pleased to come, Mrs. Lynn. We hope we can give a good time to all these wonderful boys and girls that are celebrating someone's birthday. Thomas was eloquent while speaking. He was in his role and, like if he was playing theater, his voice and gestures were receiving special attention from the kids. Samuel, on his side, was quiet. For the first time, he thought about his voice. Until then, he had concentrated on his look and mannerisms, but now he realized that he had to speak some time and was again afraid that his voice could reveal him. Yes, we're celebrating my daughter Diane's birthday. Oh, continued Thomas in his theatrical tone. Who is this fortunate lady? A lovely little girl with a turquoise princess dress advanced one step and shyly raised his hand. Congratulations, little miss. The princess and I are very glad to be here for your celebration. We hope we can give you a good time and help make this day unforgettable for your highness. Let me introduce you to my princess. The little girl approached Samuel. He didn't know what to do. He gave his hand to the girl. She held it. Samuel was nervous again, but he thought something had to be said. He tried to soften his voice, but avoided making an exaggerated high tone. Hi, little damsel. How are you? Congratulations for your birthday. Me and the prince are very happy to be here for your party. Mrs. Lynn also saluted Samuel and invited the two boys to come in. Samuel was still holding Diane's hand, but other girls were around him. They were touching his skirt and having admiring glances at the beautiful dress and the prettiness of the princess. With his free hand, Samuel was trying to lift his skirt to avoid stepping on it, as he was taught, but that was getting more difficult when entering the house. More girls surrounded him. They got into the hall where everything was decorated with stars and garlands. Spontaneously, the boys approached Thomas while the girls kept around Samuel. One of them said to him, "You are very pretty." Samuel got embarrassed again for the umpteenth time while hearing a little girl saying he was very pretty. "Thanks, little dame," replied him to the girl. "You're very pretty too." "We want to play makeup," said another girl. "Well," said Samuel, surprised by the girl's proposal, "I'm afraid I didn't bring any makeup to play with." "We have makeup," said Diane. "We were already playing with that." "Yes," said Mrs. Lin, "I bought some products for the girls and they were playing with it, but I'm afraid I'm not a great makeup artist." "Please, princess, could you do our makeup? We want to look as pretty as you," asked a fourth girl. Samuel didn't have any idea of how to apply makeup. Everything on his face and body was made by Rebecca. "Well, I'm not really good at applying makeup," said Samuel shyly. "I'm sure you will be a lot better with makeup than me," stated Mrs. Lin to improve things. "Please, please," shouted the girls. And when Diane came with her little makeup kit, Samuel couldn't avoid indulging the girls' plea. Meanwhile, Thomas was asked to play games by the boys. They wanted to play fight games pretending to be the rescuers of the damsels in distress. So, the kids' population was segregated in two poles, girls with Samuel and boys with Thomas. Samuel sat in a chair in front of a queue of little girls waiting for his services, and tried to remember how Rebecca did her job to him. Of course, it hadn't to be a professional job with the girls, and he tried just to make them feel special. He improvised with the items he was offered. He applied lipstick to the girls and some glitter powder to their cheeks and eyelids. Soon, he was feeling comfortable with his job. A smile appeared on his face when he saw how the girls looked amazed at the mirror after him putting makeup on them and how they liked the results. He wondered if he had the same face when Rebecca was working on him. But then he remembered how nervous he was and how weird he felt when he saw himself in the mirror. It wasn't the same case, of course, he wasn't prepared to look like that. But now, he was starting to feel good after all the fuss. He loved the girls' reactions when he applied makeup on them, without having much idea about it. He understood how that made them very happy. Then, some fuss took his attention. He instinctively glanced at Thomas, who was trying to separate a couple of boys that were going too far in his games. He looked at the girls again, admiring themselves in the mirror and helping each other with their beauty products, and he felt relieved that he had to take care of the girls. He again remembered Rebecca's words, "Feel always pretty and feminine, it should be easier to feel that than just pretending you are." And suddenly a wave of well-being invaded his body. He couldn't understand the reason, but he was feeling happy that he had to entertain the girls and not cope with the hyperactive boys. Somehow, he felt at the right place at that moment, and not only that, but he enjoyed helping the girls to feel pretty and happy. He followed with the makeup activity until Mrs. Lin announced some snacks were ready for the children to eat as a picnic in the park. All the girls and boys stopped what they were doing, went to pick their portion of chips and sandwiches, and ran outside to the park in front of the house. The boys were generally faster and competed to grab the biggest portions. Thomas had to put some order. Some of them were kind enough to offer some of their grabbing to the girls. Mrs. Lin offered Thomas and Samuel some snacks too, and they also went outside with the kids. Both entertainers could now have little rest and chat to compare impressions. Thomas was quite tired. "Oh, Sam, you were lucky to take care of the girls. Well, you can propose yourself for the princess position for next time, replied Samuel with a grin. I'm not sure I could play the princess. Why? I wasn't supposed to do it, you just proposed me for the role. That's true. But I think you are doing it very well. Really? I was so scared at the beginning. I noticed, but you seem fine now. The girls adore you and nobody suspects you aren't a pretty girl. A pretty girl? Samuel's face reddened again. Really pretty. Again, a wave of wellness invaded Samuel. He didn't understand. He thought he was being complimented on doing his work well, but that pretty meant something else. Yes, he was scared the whole afternoon, but right now he was confident in his role as a princess and he was thinking he could do it again. Not only could he pass for a girl playing the princess part and be liked by the little girls, but he also looked pretty for his partner in crime and flatmate Thomas. Samuel lowered his head and replied shyly, "Thanks, Thomas. You're kind, I guess." "I am. But I really feel kind next to a beautiful princess like you." Samuel couldn't avoid letting out a happy smile. He was flattered by his mate's attentions and compliments. He wasn't used to receiving them. He just turned his head. He couldn't understand why, but he couldn't look at his friend's face. He was getting emotional. A river of strange feelings flooded his body. Thomas, on his side, couldn't let his eyes out of Samuel with a big smile on his face. He also started to have feelings he couldn't understand. They both were awakened by the shouts of the kids. Prince and princess are going to kiss. 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 Samuel reddened again. He was so much inside the role of the princess that he was feeling like being flirted by Thomas. And that made him feel shyer and, somehow, feminine. He wasn't used to receiving compliments on his appearance at all. But now, he saw all the kids looking at them. The girls were smiling and the boys were laughing with what Samuel thought an evil grin on his face. Samuel tried to calm them down, but the kids insisted. "It's just a kiss," Sam said. Thomas. And then, Thomas advanced to Samuel and gave him a kiss on his cheek. He was again in his theatrical mode, exaggerating his gestures, and Samuel again let out a laugh and a smile on his face. He felt another wave of wellness invading his body. He really couldn't understand why every few minutes he was getting these feelings and enjoying them so much. The kids yelled and laughed a lot. Some of the girls covered their eyes. For them, seeing a beautiful couple kissing was the prelude of what they expected some time to be done to them. They were overexcited at that time and had to be Mrs. Lin who saved the young couple from more proposals and calmed the children down. She said it was time to get back to the house as some of their parents would come to pick them up. The kids, still shouting and laughing, behaved and followed Mrs. Lin back home, forgetting a bit about the cause of their excitement. Behind them, Thomas and Samuel looked at each other in silence. It was Thomas again who took the initiative. He took Samuel's hand and took him to the house. They looked at each other and had sincere and big smiles on their faces. Samuel got another wave, this time he could feel it in his chest. He thought at that moment that he couldn't have imagined so many emotions and that he'd be so happy to spend that day as he did. The party was coming to its end and he could think that, after all the fuss, not only it wasn't as hard and difficult as he anticipated, but he also really enjoyed it all the time. For a second, he wondered how life would be if he was really a girl. He made a quick grin and tried to forget this thought while they were entering Lynn's house again. Then, Mrs. Lin came to Thomas. "Guys, the children loved the party so much. They enjoyed every minute. Thanks. I know the deal was to finish now, but I wondered if you could stay a couple more hours, with extra pay, of course." My daughter and her friends asked for that, and anyway a few parents already called to say they will arrive later. So, if you'd like to. It's fine for me, said Thomas. Sam, what do you think about it? Samuel was surprised that Thomas agreed so early. He just heard from him that he was tired of coping with the boys. He assumed he really needed the money. I could. But Rebecca is supposed to come here to pick us up. We should call her before. Yeah, that's right. Please, call her and let me know. If she can't come later, my husband can bring you to your place. Thomas took his telephone and moved to another room to call Rebecca away from the loudness of the kids. Samuel noticed Thomas had his things with him in his pockets, while he had to leave everything at Rebecca's. No pockets in his dress to keep anything, he thought. He was distracted in these thoughts, looking at Thomas, when Mrs. Lynde talked to him. You make a beautiful couple, Samantha. Samuel looked at her with a funny face. He couldn't know if he was more shocked by the fact she just called him Samantha or because she believed they were actually a couple. Mrs. Lynde noticed the strange look on Samuel's face. Oh, darling, I didn't want to sound nosy. I just saw you both look so happy together, said Mrs. Lynde, trying to ease a blushing Samuel. Thanks, Mrs. Lynde, replied Samuel with the intention of finishing the question. At that moment, Thomas came back. Rebecca can't come later to pick us up. She has some duties in the evening. Oh, don't worry. My husband will take you home. Thanks, Mrs. Lynde, said Thomas. We're enjoying the party, so it's good we can stay longer. Great. So, I'll pay you for the extra hours. Is that okay? Yes, happily answered Thomas. But all my things are at Rebecca's. We can't go home like this, objected Samuel. It's okay, said Thomas. Mr. Lynde can bring us home, so you can change there. Tomorrow we can go to Rebecca's to give the costumes back and take your things. Your boyfriend is right, Samantha. My husband will take you to your place. You don't have to worry about walking the streets in your prince and princess costumes. And besides, your boyfriend will escort you anyway. Both Thomas and Samuel looked at each other. For Samuel, it was the second time he was called Samantha. Probably, he shouldn't blame Mrs. Lynde, as Thomas always called him Sam and the lady just thought it was for Samantha. But Mrs. Lynde also assumed that both youngsters were boyfriend and girlfriend. And Samuel wasn't at all happy about that. He looked at Thomas with a serious face while Thomas was showing a silly grin that enervated Samuel. He had to recognize that he had a very good time. He enjoyed his role as a princess and the play with the girls. He felt pretty and feminine, and even at some moments he felt some wellness he never felt before and couldn't understand the reason. For the last few hours he got used to having to hold his skirt when walking, removing the hair of his blonde wig from his hair, being treated as a girl by the children and Mrs. Lynde, even by Thomas that pretended to be flirting with him. But being assumed as his girlfriend was probably too much. His male instinct somehow emerged from deep inside him and revolted against the idea of being considered as Thomas's girlfriend. For the first time in that afternoon, he thought about taking his wig and dress off and shouting that he wasn't a girl, even less the girlfriend of his flatmate. But then, he remembered why he was dressed like this and thought that he couldn't destroy all his efforts of the day at the last moment just because he didn't like being told he was someone's girlfriend. Yes, Samantha, said Thomas, putting his arm on Samuel's back. You don't have to worry, I'll be with you all the time. Samuel moved his back to remove Thomas's arm from there. He made kind of a serious smile and said, It's okay for me, then. Perfect, then, said Mrs. Lynde. Samantha, you come with me, the girls want to do something with you, and with that, Mrs. Lynde took Samuel's hand and brought her to another room. They want to sing with you. The girls clapped when they saw Mrs. Lin coming into the room with the princess. In the room there was equipment with speakers and a microphone. "We want to sing," shouted one of the girls. Samuel didn't have any other option than let the girls sing. When he was asked to sign, he tried some popular child songs. He danced with the girls, who seemed really happy. He again felt that strange wave of wellness that made him feel happy and at ease. Meanwhile, he could hear Thomas trying to keep the boys calm. He thought how lucky he was to be taking care of the girls. They stayed for about 1 more hour like this. Boys and girls didn't mix at all until Mrs. Lin called them to have some dinner. Other parents came to pick their kids. Mrs. Lin asked Samuel, "Samantha, would you please help me to bring some sandwiches to the kids?" Samuel followed Mrs. Lin to the kitchen where she already prepared some sandwiches. She and Samuel put them on trays and brought them to the hall for the children to eat. Some parents were picking their kids. Before leaving, one of the girls asked Samuel if her dad could take a picture of them together. Soon, Samuel was doing a photo session like a model with the rest of the girls. The boys looked at him but didn't interfere with the pictures, as they were more interested in the sandwiches. One of the mothers asked Samuel for the agency's contact so that she could also have a princess party for her daughter's birthday, which was coming soon. When the woman left and shaked Samuel's hand saying "Hope to see you again soon," he thought that he would probably have to play the princess again in the future. But he immediately realized that, with time, Matt and Rebecca could probably find a girl to play this part. Suddenly, a strange feeling, a mixture of sadness and envy, invaded Samuel's body. He was sure that they would prefer a girl to play the princess and forget all the fuss they had for his transformation, but he couldn't avoid thinking that, even as he wasn't a girl, it was unfair that he couldn't do it again. He put a good effort on it, he did it well, the girls had a lovely time and parents were happy with him although they didn't know he wasn't a girl and wanted him to do it again. In that precise moment, he realized that he would like to play the princess again, because he enjoyed the whole experience. He enjoyed playing the princess. He enjoyed his transformation, he enjoyed being treated like a damsel, he enjoyed feeling pretty and feminine, he enjoyed making anyone think he was a girl, he would enjoy doing it again. "Are you all right, Samantha?" Mrs. Lin's voice woke Samuel from his thoughts. "Yes, I'm fine, Mrs. Lin." "You looked worried. I guess you must be tired. Coping with all these kids is so tiring. And you worked extra hours. You need a good rest." "Yeah, I guess so." "Don't let your boyfriend keep you from resting tonight," Mrs. Lin said with a grin while she tapped Samuel's hands. "What's his name?" Thomas answered Samuel without understanding what Mrs. Lin meant with that and realizing that he just replied to the question of his boyfriend's name. "You're lucky, he seems a very nice boy. And I can see he's fond of you." Again, Samuel couldn't avoid Mrs. Lin thinking of them as nothing else but a loving couple. Soon, all the kids had already left and Mr. Lin arrived home. He was a very handsome man in a suit. He was undoing his tie while he was greeted by Mrs. Lin, who gave her a sweet kiss, and their daughter Diane, who embraced his legs. Mrs. Lin introduced her husband to the young entertainers. "Honey, these are Samantha and Thomas. They made the kids have a very good time." "And they made kisses," shouted a still excited Diane. "Diane!" Mrs. Lin reprehended her. Samuel couldn't avoid his face turning red again by Diane's comment. Mr. Lin approached the youngsters offering his hand. "Nice to meet you, Samantha. You look like a lovely princess." Samuel could notice the strength of Mr. Lin's hand pressing on his. Samuel looked at his face and was somehow intimidated by having him so near in a way he couldn't understand. Then, Mr. Lin shaked Thomas's hand. "Love, I asked Samantha and Thomas to stay a bit longer and they don't have how to get back home. I told them you could bring them home. Of course. Just give me 1 minute to change into something more comfortable. Mr. Lin went to his room. His wife was thanking Samuel and Thomas for their work. Mom, I also want a picture with the princess, said Diane. Of course, darling. Do you mind, princes? Not at all, replied Samuel, loving Diane's petition. Samuel bent down to embrace Diane for the picture. He had to move his skirt to avoid Diane stepping on it. Mrs. Lin took a few pictures of them together hugging each other, Diane kissing the princess' cheek, both looking at each other. Then, Mrs. Lin asked Samuel if he could take a picture of him alone for Diane to remember the princess. He agreed and Mrs. Lin invited him to follow her to the balcony on the upper floor. The lady took some pictures while Samuel was posing for her. Ladies, we're ready, Samuel heard Mr. Lin shout. Mrs. Lin hugged Samuel warmly. Then, she took his hands and said to him how glad she would be to have such beauty at her home again. Samuel flushed another time and thanked her. He expressed how welcome they felt at their home and how easy it was to stay with the girls. Then, he hugged Diane again and kissed her. She looked sad. I want to meet you again, she asked. I'm sure we'll meet again someday, darling, said Samuel and hugged her again. I want to be as pretty as you when I'm big. Again, Samuel felt a flush of emotions running through his body. But this time, it was much stronger. This time, he felt he was about to cry. He couldn't understand why he was getting so emotional. He hugged and kissed Diane again and, without her noticing, he wiped a tear from his eye. He kept his composure with a forced smile when Mr. Lin came again. Thomas shook Mrs. Lin's hand and then he caressed Diane's head and said to her, "One day, you'll be a pretty princess too." Mr. Lin said bye to her wife and daughter and asked Thomas and Samuel to come to his car. When exiting the door, Samuel turned his face and saw Diane holding his mother's hand. He waved goodbye again and followed Thomas and Mr. Lin to the car. He sat behind, this time not needing much help. He knew now how to pick his skirt in order to enter the car and sit comfortably. Thomas sat at the front and was talking to Mr. Lin. So, you have a good time, guys? Yes, Mr. Lin. It was tiring sometimes but very funny. I guess it was easier with the girls, right, Samantha? Samuel wasn't paying attention. He again was absorbed with his own appearance. For the last hours, he wasn't. He got used to picking his skirt, taking the hair out of his hair and moving graciously, as it was supposed for a princess. But now, he felt again all the clothing and accessories. He could notice the necklace, the press-on of the dress, especially in his chest. He could feel the smoothness of his legs as the pantyhose rubbed them. And he again felt the pressure in his crotch, which certainly felt numb now. It looked like for the time he was doing his job, he got himself in the role of princess and he forgot about his outfit. But now, his senses relaxed and he felt strange again wearing these clothes and having long hair on his head. Sam, said Thomas to wake Samuel up. Yes, Mr. Lin, the girls were so nice. We men always have to do the tough part, Thomas? Joked Mr. Lin. Thomas and Mr. Lin kept talking on the way while Samuel was still in his thoughts about his feelings and having memories of the last hours. He was continuously feeling his dress, moving his skirt to one side or the other and rubbing them against the tights on his legs. He was also thinking on what to say to Matt and Rebecca if there was another chance of having to play the princess. He was surprised that most of the possible answers were arguments for him to be the princess again. And as before, he felt sad when thinking that they would probably get a real girl for the next time. He was again taken back from his thoughts by Mr. Lin. Guys, Do you mind if I leave you at the next corner? That way I can go straight and don't need to turn around to go back home." Samuel was suddenly terrified at hearing that. Leaving them there meant that they would have to walk in the street to their place, dressed like they were. He was nervous enough to walk the 50 yards in the park to the Lynn's house, but walking like that in the evening in a street full of student bars until the safety of their home was too much for Samuel at that moment. "Yes, no problem, Mr. Lynn," replied Thomas before Samuel could say anything. "We're just one street from the corner." Samuel couldn't believe hearing Thomas. He didn't even ask him. Does he want to come home dressed like that and be seen by anybody in the street? Of course, he wasn't the one who was dressed as a princess and had to hold his skirt while walking. He didn't have to take his wig hair out of his face and, of course, he didn't feel squeezed in his privates. "Good, thanks for it. I'll come back home to ask my daughter how the party was." "Thanks to you, Mr. Lynn, for bringing us home," said Thomas. "It's a pleasure." Samuel couldn't even speak, seeing that he'll have to walk the street to home. He thought that everything was finished, but now he got anxious again because of this last unexpected challenge. He mechanically gave his hand to Mr. Lin when he turned back to him and offered his. "Nice to meet you, Samantha. You made such a beautiful princess. We might hire you again in the future, as I learned that the kids had a great time." He then gave his hand to Thomas. "Nice to meet you too, Thomas. Take care of your princess." "I will," replied Thomas with a smile that provoked a flush of anger in Samuel. Thomas moved out of the car and opened the back door for Samuel to leave. He took again the skirt of his dress and carefully moved to the door, stepped on the pavement and had a worried look to both sides of the street before saying bye to Mr. Lin and leaving the car. They were just a few tens of meters from their house, but the atmosphere was much more different than the quiet park next to the Lin's house. The sun was already gone and lots of students were filling the street and its bars. It was one of the reasons that made Samuel choose this location, being near the university and having easy access to social spots. But now, Samuel wished they lived in a lonely cabin in a dark alley. Thomas saw Samuel's distress and, as he did in the park, he offered his arm to him. Samuel took it and they started to walk to the house. He was conscious of all the people staring at them and thought if it looked more ridiculous for him to be dressed like he was or be walking in the street by the arm of his flatmate. Samuel tried to avoid the stares and concentrate on his march, always holding the side of his skirt as he had been doing all afternoon. But he couldn't prevent hearing laughs, whistles and some comments as they were passing by lots of people who had already taken their first drinks of the night. As they were following their way home, Samuel was hearing some words which obviously were addressed to him. "Lovely, beautiful, may I be your prince," were some of the shouts he could understand. But he couldn't identify the people who did, as he didn't dare to look at the sides, with his eyes pointing at the pavement and seeing only his feet and the skirt he was always holding. At one moment, when they were less than 50 meters from home, he could see from the corner of his eye a girl running from behind that stopped in front of them, and he was paralyzed when he heard a familiar voice. "Hey, Thomas. It's me, and Samuel's mate from uni," the girl said with a big smile, holding a glass of something. "So, you finally found a princess, eh?" she asked while looking inquisitively at the girl next to Thomas. "Samuel called me, but I'm sorry I couldn't make it. Family things, you know. It looks like you had lots of fun, hadn't you? Where's Samuel, anyway? I texted him in the afternoon, but he didn't answer me." If Samuel couldn't think of anything that embarrassed him more than walking in front of drunken students, he just got the answer. His friend and was looking at Thomas, waiting for an answer to his question. Thomas was strangely silent. He was looking at and not knowing what to say. Then, he looked at Samuel and didn't know what was happening to Thomas. Then, she looked again at the pretty blonde in a princess dress that was with him. She was holding Thomas's arm with one hand and her skirt with the other. She thought they were lucky to find a very pretty princess. She, somehow, felt a little bit intimidated by her beauty. It's not that and was an ugly girl at all, but not the type of girl who wears nice dresses and spends a lot of time applying makeup on her face. She understood that, even if she had been able to help Samuel, surely she couldn't look so much like a pretty princess, like the girl who was standing next to Thomas. She just wasn't a model type of girl, like her. And looked back at Thomas, waiting for an answer. Suddenly, she looked back at the girl. She could recognize something familiar in that pretty face. "Oh my God! Samuel?" she said, putting a hand on her disbelieving face. "What?" Samuel just wanted to disappear from there. It was bad enough to be seen like that with lots of people in the streets, but being called his name and making clear to anyone that the beautiful princess that was walking the street by the arm of her prince was really a boy was too much. Some more people around the trio paid attention to the incident. Samuel wanted to leave. "Anne. Oh my God," repeated Anne, approaching Samuel and taking some hair out of her friend's pretty face. "I couldn't recognize you. You look so beautiful." In that moment, the tones of emotions that invaded Samuel that afternoon almost made him collapse. He was about to cry. He couldn't understand if the reason was the embarrassing situation that was put into or his friend calling him beautiful. Probably, it was a mix of all and the fatigue of the day. Once again, it was Thomas who noticed Samuel's distress as more people were surrounding them with attention. "And I think we should go home now. We are really exhausted from the whole day. You both can talk tomorrow and explain everything." "Yes, sure. Sorry, Sam, didn't want to disturb you. I'll call you tomorrow." "Yes, no problem, Anne. Talk tomorrow," it's the only Samuel was capable to say. And advanced to her friend to hug him and give him a sincere kiss of encouragement, before letting the two flatmates follow their path home. Samuel was so emotional at that moment, that couldn't think. He only wanted to arrive home and not to worry about anyone else. They arrived 2 minutes later. They still had to cross a couple when entering the building, a man and a woman in their 50s that were leaving the door. They probably were the parents of some students that came to pay a visit, thought Thomas, as he didn't see them before. The man opened the door and held it for the youngsters to pass. Thomas let Samuel enter first. They both had a funny face seeing the young couple. The lady also moved to let them pass. She showed a very nice smile. Samuel held his skirt with both hands, saw her and let an imperceptible thank you out. Finally they were at his building and less than 30 seconds afterwards they were entering the safety of their home. Samuel was still in shock and couldn't do anything other than sit on the couch. He was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Thomas saw it, sat next to him and could only pass his arm around Samuel's body, trying to comfort his friend. Samuel moved to Thomas so that most of his body could fit on Thomas's arm. He remembered when, as a little child, his father hugged him. He felt petite. He had a full set of strange emotions all day, that somehow couldn't or didn't know how to express. Only the mark of a small tear from a couple of minutes ago could be seen on his makeup, but that was over now. Now he was back home and trying to recover. And certainly, Thomas helped. Samuel just wanted to stay like that, without saying a word, and let his breath and heart to calm down and his whole body to relax. Thomas said nothing. He just took Samuel's hairs off of his face every now and then. After around 10 minutes, Samuel moved. He felt more relaxed now, emotionally at least. And he started to feel again the pressure of his outfit on some parts of his body. He started taking his shoes out. Thomas got up and thought about calling Matt and Rebecca to let them know they were back home. While he was on the telephone, Samuel tried to get his dress off, but he could only undo a few buttons from the back of it. He remembered how Rebecca had to help him inside the dress but couldn't do it alone. A few minutes later, Thomas came back. Matt is very happy. He got a call from Mrs. Lynn telling him that she was more than satisfied with the party. And Rebecca said we could go tomorrow to her place for you to recover your clothes. She asked me lots of questions, but I said she better ask them directly to you. Samuel let a light smile out. Thomas felt happy to see his friend smiling again. He could see he was feeling better now and smiled back. But first, I think you'll have to help me to get out of this dress, joked Samuel. Thomas laughed and approached him. Samuel gave his back to him and held his wig to one side so that he could undo the buttons of the dress, which he did, not with some problems. Thomas thought why Samuel didn't just take off the wig instead of moving to the side. Shit, this dress is not easy to take out. Try to wear it for a whole afternoon, answered Samuel, and they both laughed. Thomas finished unbuttoning the dress and let it loosen at his friend's back. Samuel, delicately, moved his arms out of it and the top part of the dress fell down. Thomas could only then see the dainty bra his friend was wearing and was very surprised. Seeing his friend dressed as a beautiful princess the whole afternoon, he couldn't imagine that he looked also feminine on the inside. But his surprise arrived to a shock when Samuel moved his legs out of the dress and he could see his friend's bottom cladded in tights that covered a pair of semi-transparent panties. Thomas felt embarrassed to see Samuel's bottom while he was accurately folding the dress and hanging it in a chair. During the afternoon, he tried to cheer Samuel up, as he understood he was very nervous. He saw he looked gorgeous as a princess. But now he felt different for his flatmate. When Samuel turned back, Thomas could see him in the front. He then appreciated the delicate floral embroidery on the lingerie Samuel was wearing. He was seeing nothing else than a beautiful blonde girl in her undies. And his body was reacting to this vision, as he could notice in his tight trousers. Samuel became conscious of his friend seeing him in a weird way. I didn't know you were wearing a bra and panties. It's a bustier, actually. How was I supposed to show boobs, like any girl? Answered Samuel. But, the panties. Rebecca insisted it was good to avoid any bulge and put myself in the role, I guess. I see. It's the only thing he could say while admiring his flatmate's figure in lingerie. Thomas understood then the whole fuss his friend had to cope with that afternoon. It wasn't just wearing a costume and some makeup. He had to really be immersed in the role. Rebecca knew it and helped Sam to feel it that way. Thomas felt a little sorry now, seeing all that and having joked about it during the day. Though he thought he just did it for Sam to feel better and lose his nervousness. He was in these thoughts while he was seeing Samuel in his feminine undies taking his dress in one arm and his shoes in the other and walking to his bedroom. He couldn't take his eyes off his friend's bottom. He felt intoxicated seeing his friend moving so gracefully, even when he was not in costume and didn't have to play the princess anymore. Samuel left the dress and the shoes in his room and turned again to the door to address his friend. Good night, Thomas. I'm so tired. Tomorrow morning we'll call Rebecca and arrange with her. Yes. Good night, Sam. And thanks for the support. The two young lads looked at each other for a few seconds. Thomas had his eyes in the flowery lace bra on his friend's chest. He assumed Sam was glad of having him that afternoon, even if he made a few jokes. He was looking so shy and innocent while thanking his friend's support. Thomas thought that was the sweetest image he ever saw in his life. And his body again reacted to make him sure about that. He couldn't guess why, but he was sure their relationship would be very different from now on. Samuel gently closed the door of his room. He removed his wig and jewelry and placed it in the same chair where he had put the dress, then proceeded to take his bra off but noticed that it would be another challenge. He could hardly arrive at its hooks. After some trials he managed to unlock the last of them, but couldn't do more. What a great idea to wear a bustier, he thought. He first thought about calling Thomas again for help, but then decided that it would be extremely strange and intimate to ask his friend to help him take his bra off. He tried to remove the straps and twist it around his waist, so he could easily unlock the hooks. He then sat on the bed and carefully took the tights off. He finally removed his panties and couldn't avoid a gentle massage in his privates. They were numb from the intense pressure of the whole afternoon. The massage was like a blessing. He could feel again these parts of their body that were physically constricted. Samuel saw a relation between the physical and emotional constriction of having to look and act like a girl and couldn't help but smile. He decided to put on his pajamas without any briefs to allow some relief during the night. He had a look at the mirror he had in his room and he was frightened to see a girl wearing his clothes. After a moment, he noticed he didn't have his makeup removed and, even without a dress or a wig, that made him still look like a girl. He spent a few seconds absorbed in the mirror. He couldn't believe his features were so feminine that he really looked like a girl in a boy's pajama. Again, strange feelings invaded his body. He went to the toilet to wash his face off. Thomas had already gone to his room. He put water and soap in his face, not having any makeup removal product. Rebecca forgot to tell him about it, as he was supposed to change at her place. He scratched his face with soap trying to remove any trace of makeup. He then dried his face and left the white towel as a mix of blurred colors. He returned to his room, got into his bed and shut the lights. In the darkness of his room, he closed his eyes and remembered the whole day. Relaxed in the security of his bed, Samuel's body was again filled with waves of emotions and questions. The image of his made-up face couldn't quit his mind. He wondered if he would have to play the princess again. Sure, Rebecca would ask him a lot of questions the next day. He also thought about the time he'd have to confront, and she would also have a lot of questions which Samuel wasn't sure if he wanted to answer. And Thomas, the relation between the two flatmates would surely be very different from now on. The intimacy of asking him to help remove his dress and being seen in feminine underwear was something he didn't expect to experience when he arrived at the house. He inadvertently held the sheets as he did with the skirt of his dress, turned to the side and wrapped his legs on them while yawning and falling asleep. Tomorrow will be another day.